Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Tao of Simplicity and the Nagual of Now. This will be a series of talks that will build on one another. If you are interested in your own personal life and evolution, you will find it helpful to listen to my first talk called Why Invest in CrystalSimplicitySociety.org. Additionally, reading my website, davidsummersong.org, will give you a greater depth of understanding about my potential subject matter, authority for speaking, and purpose in communicating with you. In my first talk, I touched on the fact that a deep understanding of physics generally produces spiritual-sounding utterances. This did not start with me or even with Einstein, but is something that is visible throughout human history. It is a small step, then, to extrapolate that Jesus was a physicist who had trouble being understood. It is interesting to consider that with the level of energy said to have been at his disposal, what his comment that we would do greater miracles in his name really means. With unlimited energy at your disposal 2,000 or so years ago, what would it have been impossible to do? What could Jesus absolutely not have done at that time? Even with the powers of heaven at his disposal, the one thing that Jesus could not do was create common vocabulary. How would Jesus have explained static cling or the powers of ivory soap to the multitudes of his time? How is this, then, really any different than his inability to explain the physics of cosmic understanding in ways that were not parables or other mystically sounding expressions? A science fiction writer defined magic as something not understood within the time frame that it has been displayed in. Scientific understanding bridges the gap between magic and miracles and how things feel. You can only know the truth of something by how it feels, and it is conceptuality that limits understanding. When one understands how energy operates in the universe, and why the greatest truth and the biggest lie are exactly the same words, one can gain command of one's individualization from source by absolute, total, unconditional surrender. The words, everything is everything, are absolutely true and yet totally false. The difference is, how does it feel? How does it feel to you? It is you manifesting. It is you manifesting your universe. Are you doing it according to your own feelings or the guidance of someone else? Various persons in the course of history have spoken about subjects such as the waters of life. If you have been on the internet, you have seen artistic renditions of the human body as light, or as energy, or as nervous system flow, or other kinds of peculiar energy centered, rooted in the earth types of pictures. If a person is able to understand the flow of electromagnetic energy that occurs between the earth and the sky, and to understand how to insert oneself as a modulated circuit into this arrangement, one benefits vastly from a flow of power that will charge your battery if you are able to hold the energy. Numerous of my articles under old essays suggest approaches and understandings to the energy holding problem. It's rather like if you have window screen in your house and the holes in the screen are large enough for a rhinoceros to come through. It's not that you don't have window screen in your house, but perhaps it's slightly ineffective, rather like holding water in a paper bag. If each and every breath of life is not renewing your energy, cheering you up, charging your battery, filling you with joyous expectation, making you want to shout, "Vindication is here," allowing you to smell the garden of the goddess wafting sweet winds from just over the hill, then you might want to consider indulging yourself in the fantasy world that I create around myself. Rather than decide if I'm correct about anything, or if you should believe something that I say, let's get current with the way the world operates now. You're accustomed to hearing about all sorts of alternate universes, alternate worlds, build-it-yourself farms, and every other kind of liberal idea potentiality on the internet. Rather than accept anything I say at face value, allow me to tell you a story of perception from an alternative point of view. You can certainly find out the how and the why of my point of view as such on my website, davidsummersong.org, and even view my hand-painted art. So let us begin back at the beginning with the beginning again. Welcome to the Tao of Simplicity and the Nagual of Now. In my previous talk, I spoke about the vocabulary of science and divinity, how the vocabulary of science and divinity continue to overlap. I would like to further address the subject and expand on my writing that Jesus was a misunderstood physicist, but in order to do so, we once again have to search for common understandings. It is important that you understand that education, for centuries, has been a method of crowd control and manipulation. Anyone who has actually learned to think while immersed in pedagogues and pedophiles did so in spite of their situation rather than because of it. Most of what you know, unfortunately, is at the very best secondhand, incorrect information. One of the problems Jesus had, and that everyone who attempts to address certain subject matter will ultimately encounter, is the differential issue. In a machine, the differential is the part that converts or merges the speed of the engine and the intended motion it produces, loosely speaking. Most people in humanity, probably including you who are reading this or listening to my presumptuous overtones, are moving too fast to perceive the simplistic, silent, slow, obvious. Castaneda spoke about it as a tension point and used the phrase intending to intend to intend. This speaks about the lack of continuity of the average human individual whose condition is the result of electromagnetic weakness and ignorance. The reason that teachers and gurus and other types of well-being speakers have said over centuries that things need to be repeated, endlessly repeated, is because of this attention point issue. A teacher or informed being will attempt a heart-level communication, rather like putting a precious diamond in the center of someone's palm and wrapping the person's hand around it, and then wrapping that hand in the other and telling them, hold on to this precious object and it will blossom in your life. They run out and throw it into the back of the proverbial pickup truck and drive away. They wonder what happened to the experience that they had in that moment, and then spend the rest of their lives trying to recover that one moment of feeling, rather than understanding where feeling comes from and how to stay rooted in it. This is the place where your karma will run over your dogma and render your sacred cow and squeeze out the juices of life. In my world, there is nothing to believe. Everything exists from feeling. If I cannot feel it, it does not exist. So when someone tells me something, I observe that they use frequency modulation to pass air between their lungs and various orifices. The content value, however, is variable, based on actual feeling. How far are you willing to indulge or allow the intrusion of formlessness into your well-thought-out identity will be important to you. If God, G-O-D, is generator, operator, and destroyer, where do rituals, religions, and other primitive pretensions fit into the desire of ultimate energy to be recognized and appreciated by you? In the beginning was longing and reluctance. It took them a long time to get together. When they did, they already had problems and issues. Thus, us. The simple explanation for the universe is that experience had to be had for understanding to occur. Vast experience has been had, vocabulary has been developed, balanced perception begins to be more aware of appropriate feeling tone dignity, and the world and the universe are changing as the speed of light increases, and all other vibrations follow suit. Let us return for a moment to the subject of first-hand knowledge. This is neither an attempt to be insulting nor funny. However, because of the speed differential issues, in order to avoid the use of excessive analogy or parable, I have chosen the device of slightly funny, stupid questions. Please indulge me in this because it will lead you somewhere that you have never been before. So, first-hand knowledge. What do you actually know through your own feelings? You may know water is wet, some things are hot or sharp or cold or blah blah blah. Those are not exactly the things I'm referring to. I'm trying to go deeper here. What will you allow yourself to directly perceive about the nature of energy itself? If you are even slightly educated, you cannot deny that you know that everything is made out of energy. Perhaps you are acquainted with the latest science, which suggests that not only are better than 90% of the cells within your human structure not human at all, just part of the ecology that makes you up, and that 98% of your human DNA is not human. So exactly who are you anyway? Do you really know? So, being made out of energy and snot is quite a position in time and space. It allows a lot of possibility. Imagine yourself as an immortal energy amoeba with identity demonstration issues. At this stage in my life, it is rather not possible for me to speak in a way that does not include a Woolbookian vocabulary. For those of you that are very literary and enjoy deep reading, I will recommend a series of books that can be found at rightuseofwill.com. The last book, Feelings Matter, can and should be read independently of the others. If one is only going to read the one book, I would recommend Feeling Matter over the series, which will take a more arduous effort, reading time, heartfelt grieving, and upheaval, and of course also result in an equitable and rewarding end result. Feelings Matter will open up your birth trauma issues big time for healing. In my repetitive reading of the approximately 2,000 pages in the Right Use of Will book series since the early 1980s, I have never found it to be even slightly different than actual absolute truth, and it suggests that if one has lost more than half their human will, it is less easy to recover individualization potentiality. So longing and reluctance have resulted in us. There is Jesus cheering on our vocabulary, our growth of experience and understanding. What really are the possibilities at this time on the levels we are capable of operating at? We keep coming back to a tension point and how intending to intend has the possibility to transform one's life. The question really is, are you a listless fragment of a larger, more complete being, or are you a being in your own right? If you're reading this or listening to me, you probably are what can be called a parental unit. This does not mean that you have progeny. This refers to your energetic status as an actual being, rather than a fragment of beingness. If you are taking the trouble to listen to me, you may have observed that divergence is occurring all around you. What your place in it is largely determined by your electromagnetic capacity and your ability to retain energy. Perhaps you have heard about the irresistible force and the immovable object trying to work out their relationship. How much pushing on can you take before you will slide away under pressure? You see, because of the limited vocabulary available even to us in this time, with all the references that we can make to static cling, Kleenex, balloons stuck to your head because you rub them on your sweater, and the fact that snow doesn't melt on the top of mountains, you probably do not believe in the electric universe. You have been indoctrinated to believe that the sun and stars are bazillions of degrees hot. Space is cold. You have been likely allowed the pedagogues of control and ignorance to defile in your mind and feeling tone the concept of astrology. Astrology and astronomy work hand in hand, expressing the potentialities of circuitry and electromagnetic alignments. Control freaks and dominant power mongers have done everything they can to increase public ignorance and decrease an individual's ability to communicate with the earth and the cosmos around them. Understanding that the universe and everything in it is based on electromagnetic flow fills in the gaps in all areas of science and physics, including the postulated particles of nuclear research. If you can understand that you are a circuit in an electromagnetic system that is based in unconditional loving permissiveness, then you understand the law of attraction as well as the law of aversion. It is worth mentioning that there are many adepts walking the surface of the planet at this time. They are doing demonstrations that are often obvious and yet are largely ignored or taken as Hollywood theatrics by those who experience them. There are countless pictures of animals in groups or pairs looking at cameras as if to say to the humans, "Do you not notice that we are rather peculiarly juxtaposed, and that ordinarily it would seem unlikely that different species of creatures would appear to be doing human-friendly gestures toward each other?" An early adept said, "Do as thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." Of course, the mentally restricted blasphemed that statement and turned it into something suggestive of evil, rather than take any personal responsibility. Do as thou wilt is indeed the whole of the law. This does not suggest in any way that demonstration of anything, at any time, is without its consequences. Look, for instance, at the Hollywood magicians who do unexplained things and then immediately require quantities of water. This takes us back to our earlier mention of the waters of life. If one's electromagnetic capacity is sufficient, one is able to introduce themselves into the flow of energy between earth and sky. My articles on approaching the burning bush speak of the necessity of continuity to develop endurance and focus. Personally, I have been practicing Taoist martial arts for nearly 60 years, and I am younger now vibrationally and internally than I have ever been. I have rejuvenated myself through my understandings from my information gathering sessions, which allow me to convey my simplified understandings of the world's available information and wisdom to you. Jesus and other mystics spoke about all types of connected experience, including going on about the waters of life. We can likely presume, and I can assure you from personal experience, that one does not go on about conductivity and connectivity unless one understands through feelings what this actually means. If your consciousness is not impeded by the static cling of old imprinting and resistance, the experience of the waters of life rushing through you invigorate you and dominate the stresses of the waters of life rushing over you and eroding you away. I am giving this talk my best effort to become passionately conservative and gentle with my discourse. It is my tendency to adamantly hammer at obstruction until it turns to dust. This causes me to try to assess the balance of the moment regarding the necessity of improvement in your well-being if you choose to remain on Earth and hold space open for yourself, to self-create, versus your comfort zone while I proceed to roll my steamroller over the carbuncles of vitrified socialization that have been applied to the purity of your soul. If you look at nature and the universe in general, you will find that the simplest thing is always the one that is true. Overcomplicating the relationship between you and divine source energy may be unnecessary. You would not necessarily have a dialogue with a pimple. You might just be more likely to have a direct, tactile, fundamental experience of it. To take the arrogance out of ego and to be delighted with the potential opportunity to be even as conscious as a pimple on ultimate source allows one a sense of freedom and ultimate relaxation. If you reach a point of actual, ultimate God realization and identification with absolute source energy, you will clearly understand that there is one and only one thing that you can actually do in human life. That is to pay attention. Jesus called it the razor's edge. Life is a pathway you walk with the bucket of materialized vitality in your hand. This razor's edge pathway divides two reservoirs. On the one side, you have the reservoir with the vitality you were born with. Every time you breathe, every time your heart beats, the bucket in your hand fills with the sacred water of life and consciousness potentiality. Consciousness is about remembering, about paying attention, about treasuring that sacred seed, that sacred eternal moment. Paying attention is about noticing that every time that bucket fills, you will empty it so that it can refill again. The question then becomes, will you empty it consciously into the reservoir of the resource of your vitality, or do you allow it to be unconsciously dispersed into the barren reservoir wherein you dispose of your unaccepted, not permitted energy potentials, fantasies, and dreams? Actively or passively, you choose a life experience posture. If it no longer fits, perhaps more expansion and flexibility will help you more easily reach for your dreams.